Have you ever looked at someone you trusted, a friend, a partner, maybe even family, and suddenly felt like you never really knew them at all? It's not a loud betrayal. It's the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't break you all at once, but seeps into your chest at 2 a.m. when your memories no longer match their energy. You opened up. You gave your time. You believed. But something inside you starts whispering, wait, were they ever real or just playing a role? They said the right things. They smiled at the right moments. But now your gut is telling a different story. And you're left asking, did I mistake attention for care? Did I confuse performance with presence? If you've ever felt that you're not alone, and you're not crazy, in this video, we're not here to judge. We're here to see clearly, to explore 7 unmistakable signs that someone in your life may not be as genuine as they appear. And more importantly, how to respond with the calm, grounded power of Stoic philosophy. You don't need to become cold. You don't need to live in suspicion, but you do need clarity. Because discernment isn't harsh, it's protective. So here's a simple challenge for you. By the end of this video, count how many of these signs you've experienced personally. If it's more than a couple, it might be time to rethink who gets access to your heart. Let's begin. You've always been the dependable one. The one who picks up the phone at 2 a.m. The one who says yes, even when you're running on empty. The one who shows up heart first. No questions asked. And you don't do it to be praised. You do it because that's who you are. Because you believe in showing up, in loyalty, in care, in presence. But one day, you hit a low. Maybe it's heartbreak. Maybe it's quiet burnout. Maybe it's just a silent kind of heaviness you can't carry alone anymore. So you reach out. You send the message. You make the call. And all you hear is silence. Or worse, you get a rehearsed excuse. I wish I could help, but I've just got so much going on. Hang in there. I'll check in later. But later never comes, and neither do they. And in that moment, something inside you shifts. Not just because you're hurting, but because clarity shows up in the form of absence. You start to see it. They were never truly with you. They were only ever around you. They showed up when they needed something to vent, to be affirmed, to draw warmth from your presence. But when you became the one in need, they vanished. No support. No follow-up. No. How are you holding up? Just gone. And the hardest part, they'll still message like nothing happened. Still come to you the next time they want to unload. Because to them, you're not a friend. You're a function. A therapist with no fee. A resource with no boundaries. And that realization, it cuts quietly. Because it doesn't arrive with betrayal. It arrives with absence. This is where Stoic philosophy steps in, not to harden your heart, but to center your worth. Marcus Aurelius said, when you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love. That quote isn't about ignoring pain. It's about remembering your value, even when others forget it. Because your worth isn't tied to who checks in on you during a storm. It's rooted in something deeper, the fact that you showed up with real presence, even when they didn't. Stoicism doesn't tell you to stop caring. It teaches you to stop overextending for those who only show up when the skies are clear. Expectations aren't bad, but they're expensive, especially when you invest them in people who never earned the right. So instead of asking, why weren't they there for me? Try asking, why did I keep assigning them a role? Their behavior never qualified them for. You don't need to be angry. You don't need to confront. You don't even need closure. What you need is clarity. Clarity that says, I can love you and still create space. I can forgive you and still stop expecting effort. Because real friends show up when it's inconvenient. Not perfectly, but genuinely. They reach in when everyone else retreats. So, if someone disappears in your darkest hour, don't chase, don't beg, don't break. Just breathe. Step back and let that moment redraw your boundaries. Because the person who vanished during your storm, they weren't a loss. They were a lesson, a quiet revelation wrapped in pain, but a gift nonetheless. And the next time you reach out and hear only silence, don't spiral. Get wise. Let it clarify. Let it free you. Because the space they left behind, that's not a void. That's room for real connection to finally take its place. Have you ever felt like you're the one holding the thread? Like if you stopped texting, stopped calling, stopped checking in, the relationship would just quietly disappear. No fight, no closure, just silence. And that silence, it speaks volumes. Because when someone never reaches out first, never checks on you, never initiates, you have to ask yourself the question we all avoid. Would this connection even exist if I stop trying? It creeps in slowly. Not as a betrayal, but as a fading echo. You replay the laughter, the memories, the times you thought it was mutual. But now, you start to notice. You've been the glue all along. They don't call unless you do. They don't text unless you start. They don't ask unless you prompt. And when you stop, nothing. At first, you rationalize. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're just not good at staying in touch. But here's the truth. Patterns don't lie. Intent lives in effort. And if someone consistently disappears until you drag the relationship back into focus, that's not friendship. That's emotional convenience. Now, let's be fair. Not everyone who forgets to text is fake. Life gets loud. People get overwhelmed. But real connection, it reciprocates even imperfectly. People who care might not always be consistent, but they reach. They show up in small ways. A message, a meme, a simple, "Hey, I thought of you." But when someone makes zero effort, when their silence becomes the rhythm, not the exception, you're not in a relationship, you're in a performance. And you're playing both roles. This is where Stoicism clears the fog. Epictetus said, when someone is properly grounded in life, they shouldn't have to look outside themselves for approval. That includes attention. That includes effort. That includes emotional labor you shouldn't have to beg for. So what do? You don't blow up. You don't write a novel-length text. You don't plead. You pose. You stop initiating and let space reveal what effort used to conceal. If they care, they'll notice. They'll reach, even if awkwardly, even if late. But if they don't, let that silence finish the sentence. Because here's the truth. If someone's connection to you requires your constant effort to survive, it was never connection. It was dependency on your consistency. And when you finally let go, when you stop chasing, you create room for something far more powerful: mutual energy. Reciprocity. People who don't just reply, but reach. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, if I don't text, we might never speak again, pause. Let that truth settle, not with bitterness, but with clarity, because some relationships aren't falling apart. They were just being held together by your hope. And when you stop holding what's real stays. What was one-sided quietly exits. That's not failure. That's freedom. And in that quiet space, you don't just protect your peace, you reclaim it. Have you ever been in a conversation that didn't feel like a conversation at all? You showed up hoping for connection. Instead, you got a performance. They talk, non-stop, about their goals, their struggles, their stories, their wins. And you're not seen, not asked, not felt, just there, quietly orbiting their spotlight. You try to chime in, but your words dissolve midair. They nod, maybe toss in, That's wild, but within seconds, the focus snaps right back to them. And eventually, you stop trying. Not because you're quiet, but because you've been made invisible. This isn't just selfishness. This is patterned self-absorption, performed with just enough charm to keep you from calling it out. They're not here for connection. They're here to be seen, to be mirrored, to feel important. And if you're honest, you've probably walked away from these moments feeling drained. Not because the topic was heavy, but because you were never in it. Your voice was a transition, your presence, a placeholder, your emotions, never truly welcome. Even when they ask about you, it's not care, it's choreography. A brief pause before circling the conversation back to center stage them. This is where Stoicism hands you back your voice. Epictetus said, "Nature gave us one tongue and two ears, so that we may listen twice as much as we speak. But not everyone listens. Some pretend, just long enough to reclaim control. So what do? You don't shout. You don't beg for space. You don't say, 'Can we talk about something other than you?' You observe. You detach. You exit without noise, without guilt, without apology. Because every time they dominate the space, they prove it wasn't shared to begin with. And here's what Stoicism teaches. You don't have to compete for room in a one-man show. You just have to stop sitting in the audience. This isn't about ego. It's about emotional equity, about knowing when the stage was never meant to be shared. Real friends don't speak at you. They speak with you. They ask. They pause. They respond with presence, not pretense. And when you find those people, you'll feel it instantly. This isn't performance. This is presence. This is mutuality. So if someone only ever focuses on themselves, don't match their self-absorption with frustration. Match it with silence, with clarity, with redirection toward people who make space, not just noise. Because you were never born to be someone's echo. You were born to speak, to feel, to share. And the moment you realize they're not listening, you stop handing them the microphone. That's not defiance. That's discernment. That's the Stoic way. Have you ever shared something that mattered to you, a win, a wound, a worry, and the next time you brought it up, they didn't remember? Not a detail, not a reaction, not even a flicker of recognition in their eyes. You find yourself saying, "Remember when I told you about that big meeting?" Blank stare. "I mentioned that thing I was nervous about." They smile, vague, disconnected. And that's when it hits you. They were there, but never really present. They heard the words, but they didn't carry the weight. They listened with their ears, but never with their heart. And in that moment, something inside you shrinks. Not in anger, not in drama, but in quiet grief, because this isn't about memory. It's about meaning. When someone forgets what you share consistently, they're not just forgetful, they're showing you how little your voice echoes in their world. You start questioning yourself. Am I asking for too much? Maybe I'm being sensitive. But here's the truth: we remember what matters to us. Not perfectly, but intentionally. When someone values your presence, they follow up. They ask again. They hold space. Not out of politeness, but because you matter. But when someone forgets everything, every dream, every detail, every moment you offered in vulnerability, that's not forgetfulness. That's absence in disguise. I once had a friend I thought was solid. We laughed, shared stories, exchanged secrets like currency. One day, I opened up about something I hadn't told anyone else. Something tender. They nodded, said all the right things, moved on. A week later, I brought it up again, and they had no idea what I was talking about. That moment stayed with me. Not because they forgot the topic, but because they never valued the weight behind it. This is where Stoicism speaks through silence. Epictetus wrote, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourself." That includes being remembered, being held, being seen. Because your worth doesn't live in someone else's memory. It lives in the way you honor your own voice when others don't. You don't need to chase attention. You don't need to keep reminding someone that your life deserves follow-up. You just step back, not with resentment, but with revelation, because presence is a form of love, and someone who chooses not to be present has already answered the question you were afraid to ask. Do I matter to them? And if the answer is silence, you don't argue with it. You just take your stories elsewhere. To those who say, "How did that meeting go? You mentioned you were struggling. How are you now? I've been thinking about what you shared." Those people are rare and real and worth the wait. So if someone keeps forgetting what you share, stop trying harder. Stop repeating yourself. You're not a background voice in their movie. You're the lead character in your own. And the moment you realize they're not reading your story, you stop handing them the next page. That's not bitterness. That's Stoic discernment. Because the person who forgets your words was never holding your heart. So let them go. Gently, clearly, and give your voice to those who don't just listen, they remember. At first, they seem perfect, curious, engaged, supportive. They ask about your life, your struggles, your goals. They remember details. They follow up. They make you feel important. But over time, something feels off. Too perfect, too timed, too aligned with what they need, not what you're living. You start to notice the rhythm. They show up right before asking a favor. They compliment you, then pitch you. They check in, only to circle back to their problems. Their kindness is real but not rooted in care. It's calculated. You're not paranoid. You're perceptive. This isn't friendship. It's positioning. They're not trying to build something mutual. They're mining access. Not gold. Not gossip. But levrage. You become a shortcut. A tool. A stepping stone dressed up as connection. It starts subtly. Can I borrow your notes? Could you introduce me to your friend? Would you mind reviewing this real quick? Then it scales. They're around more when you're winning. Scarce when you're struggling. They know your skills, your reach, your energy, but never your heart. And when you need them, they vanish. Or worse, become vague. That's when it hits you. This was never about who you are. It was always about what you offer. This is where Stoicism clears the fog. Seneca said, "Associate with those who make you better." And let's be clear, that doesn't mean perfection. It means mutual elevation. You're not here to be exploited. You're not here to be valuable only when you're useful. So what do? You don't explode. You don't ghost. You don't launch a confrontation. You just get clear. You step back and observe. Is their interest tied to advantage? Do they only show up when it benefits them? Are they present when you're depleted, or only when you're glowing? And if the answer is yes, that's not a betrayal. It's a reveal. You don't need to accuse. You don't need to expose. You just stop offering unlimited access to someone who was only in it for the transaction. That's Stoic discernment. Quiet boundary. Firm hand. No drama. No apology. Because someone who only shows up to gain will leave the second you say no. Let them find a new source to mine. You're not their resource. You're not their therapist. You're not their silent sponsor. You are a human being, with energy, with value, with emotional currency worth protecting. So, if someone always has a hidden motive, don't internalize it. Don't spin in confusion. Just observe. Then recalibrate. Because real relationships aren't strategic extractions. They're quiet collaborations. They don't drain, they build. They don't take advantage, they take care. So next time someone smiles with an offer that smells like a setup, don't panic. Don't play the game. Just stay still, stay sharp, and stay selective. That's not cold. That's controlled self-respect. That's Stoicism. They smile when you enter the room. They nod. They laugh. They may even compliment you. But something feels off. The warmth is thin. The eye contact doesn't land. And silence starts to feel heavy. You can't prove it. No one's told you anything directly, but you feel it. The shift, the tension, the way mutual friends act a little different now. And deep down, you already know. They're talking behind your back. Not loudly. Not publicly. Just enough to shape how others see you without ever confronting you to your face. That's the part that stings. They don't challenge you head-on. They reshape you quietly in rooms you're not in. In conversations you'll never be invited to clarify. And the worst part, you might still call this person a friend. They still send memes, still comment on your posts, still say, "Miss you," but their energy says otherwise. Their silence is loaded. And you're no longer sure which version of you they're sharing with the world. This is emotional cowardice dressed as social charm. They don't want resolution. They want control without confrontation. They whisper what they're too afraid to say aloud. They manage perception while keeping their hands clean. This is where Stoicism gives you your power back. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In other words, their gossip isn't the wound, your investment in it is. They can shape stories. They can shift perception, but they can't touch your character. And character. That's what speaks loudest when you say nothing at all. So what do? You don't chase the rumors. You don't demand an explanation. You don't defend your name to those who won't ask for your truth. You let your life speak. You let your energy clarify what their whispers distort. And you remind yourself, I don't need everyone to believe me. I only need to stay anchored in who I am. Because, here's the truth, reputation is who they say you are. Character is who you stay, especially when misread. You don't need to confront. You don't need to correct. You don't even need to be angry. You just stay steady. Keep doing the work. Keep showing up clean. Keep living in such a way that the rumor can't hold weight over time. Because time, it's the great filter. And eventually, the contrast between what they say and who you are becomes too loud to ignore. So if you feel someone is talking behind your back, don't spiral. Stand still. Stay sharp. Let their noise echo in the silence you command. Because when you choose not to fight, but to live in quiet alignment with your values, you send a message that outlasts any whisper. I don't need to clap back. My character will do it for me. That's Stoic clarity. Not passive. Just untouchable. They're warm with you, in private. Affectionate. Present. Familiar. The kind of person who says, I've always got your back. But then, the room changes. You're no longer alone. There's a new crowd. Someone with status. Someone with clout. And suddenly, so do they. Their tone shifts. Their energy shifts. You become background noise to their ambition. They laugh a little louder, stand a little straighter, position themselves just right. And your connection, it vanishes without confrontation, without explanation. No argument, no tension, just quiet disappearance in plain sight. You realize you were never a friend. You were a placeholder until someone better showed up. And deep down, the question hits, were we ever close, or was I just convenient? That's the sting. They don't reject you. They rearrange you in service of their audience. This is social loyalty on a sliding scale, where presence depends on who's watching, where connection is conditional on who's in the room. They perform. They pivot. They adapt, not because they've grown, but because they're afraid to stay still. And when the crowd disappears, they come back. Soft, kind, familiar again. But something has changed. Because someone who's real with you doesn't reduce you just to rise in someone else's eyes. This is where Stoicism straightens your spine. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So ask yourself, what color are they when the spotlight hits? Because someone who morphs to match every room isn't evolving, they're dissolving. And if they erase you in the process, that's not your friend. That's your cue. You don't need to confront. You don't need to ask why you weren't enough. You already know. Real loyalty doesn't shapeshift. It doesn't whisper in private then. go silent in public. It stays. It stands. It doesn't flinch when someone with more status walks in. So what do? You don't retaliate. You don't compete. You don't match their disconnection. You withdraw. You redirect. You remember that attention isn't the same as honor, because those who change to fit the room aren't becoming stronger, they're becoming scattered. And the mask, eventually, it cracks. You just don't have to be there when it does. That's not coldness. That's clarity. It's not distance from the person, it's closeness to yourself. That's Stoic loyalty, steady, selective, and never for sale. Fian ban ting ching. You don't have to question everyone. You don't have to walk through life guarded, cold, or paranoid. But you do need to be clear, because not every connection is real. Not every smile is sincere. And not everyone who gets close deserves to stay close. You're not here to overanalyze. You're here to observe, to protect your peace, not with fear, but with wisdom. The wise are not suspicious. They are simply observant and deliberate with their trust. You don't need confrontation. You don't need revenge. You don't even need closure. You just need to watch. Watch the patterns. Watch the timing. Watch how people behave when there's nothing in it for them. And when someone shows you who they are, not with words, but with consistency, believe them. Because in a world that's loud with performance, your greatest protection is quiet discernment. You don't need to build walls. You just need to install filters. And those who are real, they'll pass through with ease. They'll show up without prompting. They'll stay the same, no matter who's in the room. The rest, let them go. Not with anger, not with bitterness, with clarity, with composure, with the kind of peace that doesn't chase applause or entertain illusions. Because when you stop mistaking performance for presence, you don't just protect your heart, you elevate who gets to enter it. Now I want to hear from you. What's one moment that made you realize someone wasn't who they claimed to be? Or simply comment, "I've walked away from a fake connection." Because when we tell the truth, even quietly, we help others wake up too. If this video helped you feel seen, do the same for someone else. Click like, hit subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another lesson in Stoic clarity and self-respect. And when you're ready for the next step, watch this next: how to handle manipulators like a modern Stoic. Because awareness is the first step, but mastery, that's what we build together. Stay sharp, stay steady, and most of all, stay selective. Because your peace isn't just precious, it's powerful.